Hey everyone, welcome back to another of Vendal's weekly arcade quest tutorials. So I have some good news. After this next week and in time, so after next Wednesday, I will be done with finals and open and have a little more free time. I also have some bad news. I can't hear out of my left ear right now because I don't really know why. I don't really have an earache. I just can't hear. It's probably just some build up or whatever. Anyways, not you guys' problem. So this week up, we have an interesting weekly quest that taunts you quite frequently to use the exploits given and makes it very difficult to actually beat the quest without just ledging people. That being said, it is definitely possible to beat the quest without ledging anyone. However, I don't recommend going through that because you're going to give yourself a lot of frustration. So this week is the Haunting of Dead Shades, and apparently Dead Shades is a place, and there's this guy that keeps possessing everybody and trying to get them to kill each other named Ryoshi, or something like that. As far as character choice goes for this particular quest, you're going to want someone that's very good at anti-ganks, or alternatively someone with hyper armor, just because of how it's going to interact with some of the matchups and things you're dealing with during this fight. I don't recommend any assassins other than the berserker. You're going to have a hard time just because, like I said, you have to anti-gank quite a lot. I'm going to spend most of the time on Phase 4 just because that's where the bulk of the difficulty in this quest comes from. That and some serious time on Phase 3 as well. The Peacekeeper fight here, I'm just going to touch very quickly at the beginning. She looks like she's burning to death, but at the same time she regenerates hit points over time, which the effect is pretty much that she just has stabilized hit points. So you're basically just fighting a on fire for no good reason, regular level 3 Peacekeeper. It does take a little bit to handle her, but every character in the roster has matchups that tend to work pretty well against the combos that work well against the Peacekeeper. For example, in the Kensei's place, his zone works really well against her forward dash, and just his side dash heavy is pretty easy to just, for some reason, clip level 3 AIs with, and they don't parry it very frequently. So figure out whatever works for you. I'm not going to put any more time into that section because it is just a fight against a level 3 Peacekeeper. Chapter 2, Bargaining, is where things get a little bit interesting. You've got extra damage, and you heal on kills so you can sustain, and your 3 enemies cheat death so they come back to life frequently. Now, also note that the Raider has less hit points and is uninterruptible, but cheats death a little faster than the other two. Therefore, it should be your focus to kill him last because he'll go down quicker and will come back the soonest, so you want to make sure that he's the last person you take out rather than the first, because otherwise he might come back before you finish everyone. I was actually really surprised because as my berserker, I beat this quest the very first time I attempted it. I think most of the bots are level 2. The Raider might be level 3, but most level 3 AIs have kind of a stupid interaction with their uninterruptible, making it easy to get hits off on them, and your boosted damage makes it a pretty easy clear. That being said, you can struggle with it a little bit if you're just not prepared for what's happening, but keep trying and you'll get the clear pretty easily on this one. It's really not that bad for 1v3. 2 of the bots are definitely level 2 or lower, and decently easy for you to handle, and with your damage up, it's pretty easy to dispose of them quick enough that you don't even have to think about the cheat's death. I think I've cleared this one like a total of 6 times. There's only one time where I had to kill one person one extra time, just because I screwed up getting the kill a little earlier than planned the first time. But for the most part, this is just a hack and slash, beat your way through it. There's no real easy exploits with the stage on this one, but like I said, you shouldn't need it as long as you just know how to anti-gank a decent amount. Focus on your defense until you get revenge the first time, and then just really open up on them because they're really not going to parry what you put out, and you'll do just fine. So moving on to Phase 3, Depression. This is where things get interesting. So you're up against a Chiandi, and you're given you don't have a UI. There's no fight UI. Having no fight UI is really interesting because you're entirely dealing with just the animations for the character, and this made me just realize how hard it is to tell what a Chiandi is doing with some of her side steps and dashes and things like that. It's really hard to tell where things are coming from, other than just the fact that after a push, you know the next light is going to be a top light. Eventually, you're going to get tired of this, and you're going to want to do this the easy way. Namely, come down here, heal up after you've been punished for a while, and then throw her in the pit. This really is the simplest way, and I kind of recommend just doing this, especially if you're just trying to farm, because it is very frustrating to handle this fight otherwise. However, there are a few exploits that people have against level 3 Tiandis. For example, a level 3 Tiandi for some reason reacts very terribly to an opening heavy feinted into an opposite side heavy. They'll do an empty dodge and just eat the second heavy more than 50% of the time. I've tested this a lot, and really, more than 50% of the time, you can reliably just get that safe second heavy off. You see that 4 times here in this fight. That's what I do to kill her. It's just repeatedly disengage, opener side heavy, feint into the other opposite side heavy, and you get the clear pretty easily that way if you're going for an opener kill. It also works with the Aramusha. It works with a lot of people. You don't necessarily need hyper armor for it either. If you want to just bulk your way through it, it is possible to do it with real quick twitch parrying too, but you're going to have a hard time trying to get past that Tiandi that way. So the final fight is really interesting. You're up against a Nobushi that has a utterly ridiculous amount of health, and then 2 enemies that die just over time, but cause bleeding and respawn repeatedly. Now there's a lot of things that make this fight very frustrating and interesting, and there is a ledge that you can use to your advantage. In fact, I had trouble. I really wanted to get a clear with the berserker, where I did so just in a regular fight, and I got really close to so many times, and then like 3 times I just ended up ledging her instead of actually finishing the fight, nearly by complete accident. In almost all cases, it was just kind of like I was exhausted, and it just kind of happened because she puts herself by the ledge quite frequently when you're fighting. So things to be aware of in this fight is the bleed that your opponents give you. Certainly you've got to watch out to your health in general, and you've got to keep aware of your anti-gank tactics because the enemies are going to be repeatedly coming in, but getting hit with the bleed is your absolute worst moment here. And that's because if you get hit by just 1 hit with the bleed, even if you're in revenge, that bleed will carry on over when your revenge runs out and will kill you the moment it goes down, because it'll just drop, your shield will drop, and then that hit will cut through and the bleed tick will occur. During this fight, I struggled really hard to avoid ledging her, but because of positioning and because I didn't want to just be engaging the other 2, just die and come back anyways, I needed to keep going after her, so I had to keep the gap closed with her so the shinobi didn't engage me, but she kept trying to just stand by that edge. I almost knocked her off like 4 times here and probably could have very easily done so, but I chose not to because I wanted to get the clear with actual legit fighting. But here you'll see an interesting thing happen. I get bleed damage here, but I have enough hit points after the bleed damage that I should have stayed alive. You see that? There's a little sliver of white there. But because I block a hit externally, it makes it so I take chip damage, and now the bleed damage will carry on enough to kill me. So it's really frustrating. You really got to try not to get bleed hits when you're in revenge or anywhere during the fight, because they can really mess you up. You are not able to continue to chain revenges if you get a bleed, because even if the bleed wouldn't kill you, the chip damage will knock you into a position where the bleed can. Obviously though, like I said before, the easy way to handle this fight is just to actually finish her out by throwing her off the ledge. Now, as far as trying to do this legitimately, like I said earlier, it's very hard just because of what you're dealing with, but this is where your anti-gank skill comes in. I recommend doing just the fast twitch where you're moving the control stick a lot so you're on top of your game and you're ready to move and react to anything that's going on. Though Nobushi, generally speaking, is not that hard to deal with and get parries off of, because a lot of her attacks are very visual. You can see the sweep coming, it's really easy to time the parry, and they're all slow enough, even her lights, that you're not going to have too much of a problem with it. The main thing to look out for is her hidden stance, accompanied by you know, one of her kicks or follow-ups. If you pay attention to those, you'll do just fine. She even has a habit of putting herself out of stamina a lot. You'll also notice again in this video, I didn't want to ledge her. I pulled back a couple times when she got really close to the ledge, but because I needed to stay engaging her, it just kind of happens. And that's just really kind of the way the quest goes down. I do have a clear with my Aramusha where I fought and beat her legitimately, and I know I could do it with my berserker, but I just already, it's the 4th phase of the quest. I got here 3 times with the berserker, and then all 3 times ended up ledging her. I just did not feel like trying to get that recording again in this moment, and as I am prepping for finals, it just wasn't worth it. But here's that clear with the Aramusha. You'll see the same kind of general tactics going on. Employ quick twitch movements so that you're ready to parry anything, block anything, handle the external attackers, attack the Nobushi whenever you have the opportunity to, and pretty much for the most part just attempt to ignore the Orochi and the Shinobi. If you can, get engaged in combat with the Orochi and the Nobushi, because by doing so the Orochi is far easier to deal with and anti-gank than the Shinobi is, who can back off and hit you from range and do some more surprising grabs and things like that. Whereas the Orochi is more likely to just repeatedly try to slash at you with blank heavies and blank lights, and they're really easy again to parry or counter in whatever way is necessary. Now here with my Aramusha, I pull this off because I have that wonderful perk that we've talked about before, Vengeful Barrier. Vengeful Barrier allows you to essentially negate some of the bleed damage after coming out of Revenge. I would have died there due to the bleed damage if it wasn't for Vengeful Barrier covering for my hit points, just because of how the bleed damage carries over past Revenge. So having that perk is a staple. It really helps a lot during this particular fight. So this week is kind of cool because we had more executions come out. So of course I'm going to do my usual little special where I feature them at the end, and that's now what we're going to go ahead and get into. Alright, so starting up first, we're just going to go through them in order, and I'm just going to discuss slightly my opinion of them. So the Warden's new execution, Fractured Ribcage. This one's a little ridiculous to me. The way he pulls the sword out after messing with the opponent is just not quite realistic, especially because the sword would dig into the ground. Therefore, it's not one of my particular favorites. Peacekeeper one is a little bit interesting, but actually from a blade stuck in the ground like that, getting enough momentum to actually cut through someone's head, very, very unlikely. Especially if they had any kind of guarding armor on their head. You could not clean slice through a spine like that. The Centurion one is another really nice, really clean series of punchings, jabs, and, you know, general showmanship. I like it. The Blackbriar one's fun, decently realistic, and just kind of interesting how the opponent gets stuck on the blade. Now, the Conqueror one is cool because he's got like a nunchaku spin in there, but I don't really know how feasible it is to do nunchaku-styled, like, momentum spins with a flail. Certainly it's more risky than doing them with nunchaku, and with nunchaku, you know, you're not really dealing with accidentally spiking yourself in the armpit, and that's my only complaint against that one. The Lawbringer one's just another simple pull and drag. And I love the Gladiator one. You've got a feint in there, and guess what? It features toes again. Everyone knows the Gladiator loves toes. Alright, so the Raider, this one's a little ridiculous to me just because it feels like out of place, just stand there and laugh. But, you know, for some people, that pride concept, it definitely identifies the Raider, and it's fun that way. The Berserker one here is cool, but some of the movements with how he manipulates the opponent's arms don't feel really streamlined to me, so it's not my absolute favorite. This one, I hate this kind of thing. The simple neck break that you see in, like, movies all the time. It's not that easy to kill someone. It's stupid. The whole neck snapping thing, and so that Highlander one bothers me. The Warlord one, sorry I'm getting a little behind. The Warlord one's pretty cool just because perfect stabbing and manipulation. Valkyrie one, I also kind of like. The nice spear and like stamp down is kind of cool, but it probably wouldn't go down exactly like that physics-wise. Shaman one, this one is another one that identifies her character. This one's actually probably one of my favorite executions because it just kind of shows the general craziness that the Shaman has without being overly gross. The new Kensei one is beautiful. It's a series of combination, very clean strikes, and this is definitely one of my absolute favorites for this batch, and I will be picking it up at some point. The Orochi one definitely looks better with decapitations involved because the cut is very clean and actually perfectly aimed for the head, so it looks very nice when it comes off. But at the same time, it's just another kind of weeby styled one, especially with the flash that they give it, that I thought was a little bit unnecessary. This one from the Shinobi, I actually thought looked better without decapitations because the momentum in it is not enough to cause a decapitation, but it is enough to slit someone's throat. Therefore, I like the non-decapitation better. The Shigoki one is just that quick, heavy slam, and another slam to follow up. The Nobushi one here is one of my absolute favorites of the Nobushi. I've never really liked any of hers, but this one is artful, skillful, it's a fun dance, and it finishes out well. So now we have the Aramusha, this little explodey kick throw grenade thing. It's not my favorite. I do not like the sound effects and the characterization they give the Aramusha. He's got two swords. I'd like to see more executions that actually utilized it. And it kind of frustrates me that they give him this odd movie-like sense. Tiandi-1, it looks very similar to a lot of his other Tempests, but this one features a little more brute strength with that carry-through cut at the end. The Zhongjun one, I really like this one because you actually do see these bounces in real martial arts, and they're an impressive display of poise and skill. The Nuxia one also is a very nice, clean, and very skilled kill. It's not as flashy as some for others, but I like it for its cleanliness. The Shaolin, I like all of his executions. They're all either fun or goofy or just really interesting and feature his particular style of combat really, really well. And there's another one that does just that with his quick flurry of blows there. Well, that about sums it up for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Look forward to next week, which should be coming out right on Thursday this time because I'll be done with finals. Anyways, remember, modifiers modify your playstyles. Have a good week. Vendel out.